I'm Maura, and I thought I was building a life with family who loved me. Instead, I uncovered betrayal buried so deep it shattered everything I believed in. They forged my name, stole what I worked for, and tried to destroy my future, all while smiling to my face. How does a family fall so far? Before we dive in, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. The rain clawed at my windows like desperate hands. Charlotte's winter nights always carried a loneliness, but tonight it sank deeper. I sat hunched over my laptop, the dim light from a single desk lamp casting long shadows across my minimalist apartment. The heater whirred in the background, a poor companion to the ache in my chest. My fingers tapped mechanically on the keys, but my mind drifted to nothing, to everything. The phone lit up. Dad calling? For a second, I stared at it, heart stuttering. I hadn't heard from him in months. Maybe, just maybe, it would be different this time. Maybe he'd say he missed me, that he was proud. I swiped to answer. Silence. I waited, the seconds stretching painfully. Then, the soft scrape of a chair, a grunt, and finally, Russell's voice, low and cold. "You were a mistake, Maura," he said, words sharp enough to slice skin. A burden from the start. A sharp breath. Darla, my mother, her voice barely a whisper. "We just did what we had to." Their laughter, dry and bitter, filled the void where love should have lived. I sat frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, the sound of my own heartbeat drowning them out. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Disbelief pinned me in place. Then the heartbreak slammed into me, a heavy, relentless tide. Without thinking, my hand trembled and fumbled the device. The screen flashed. Recording. I hadn't meant to. Somehow I had recorded every syllable, every cruel breath. Proof. It wasn't just my imagination or distorted memories. It was real. The weight of it crashed down, snapping something inside me. Grief boiled into something darker, something hotter. Rage. I set the phone down gently, as if it were a bomb that had already exploded. 16 years ago, I remembered huddling in the hallway, pressing my ear to the door, hearing them argue about how I ruined everything. I thought if I became perfect, they'd change. I thought if I made enough money, achieved enough, they'd finally see me. Now I knew better. Tears blurred my vision, but I let them fall, silent and hot. The rain outside blurred into the city lights, a mess of color and grief. I pulled my knees to my chest on the worn leather couch, rocking slightly. The heater clicked, releasing a warm gust that barely touched the chill inside me. "I worked so hard," I whispered into the empty room, my voice cracking. "I gave everything. All the birthdays missed, the weekends spent studying, the promotions celebrated alone. I had built an empire brick by brick, and for what?" I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweatshirt and stood. The skyline blinked back at me, indifferent. It didn't care about betrayals or broken daughters. Neither did they. I crossed the room in 3 strides, yanked open the bottom drawer of my desk. Hidden beneath old tax documents and forgotten contracts was a flash drive, the one holding every dirty secret tied to the family home. The land deals, the fraudulent loans, the hidden accounts. I plugged it into my laptop. They thought I was weak, disposable. But I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was their reckoning. The heater buzzed steadily in the background as I paced the living room, each step sharper than the last. Fury clashed with the remnants of sadness inside me, forming something far more dangerous. Resolve. My mind raced. Should I confront them? Expose them? Or should I let them keep hanging themselves with the very rope I had unknowingly given them? I stopped by the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. The city glimmered beyond, alive and indifferent. Somewhere out there, my parents slept soundly in a house they thought they still owned. A hollow laugh escaped my lips. They had no idea. I turned back to my laptop and entered the password to the encrypted folder tucked neatly inside JSC Holdings, my personal shell company. The files opened like a wound. Line after line of paperwork, mortgage documents, titles. It was all there. 6 years ago, Darla had called me late at night, her voice shaking with desperation. "We're drowning, Maura. Your father won't say it, but we need you." I didn't hesitate back then. I paid off the debts, secured the mortgage through my company, and made sure everything looked seamless. On paper, they still lived in their dream home. In reality, it was mine. I could have pulled the rug out from under them at any time, but I didn't. I clung to some naive hope that saving them might finally make me enough. A silent plea: see me, love me, choose me. All it got me was a knife between the ribs, served cold over the phone. My fingers hovered above the screen, tracing the boundaries of my patience. How many betrayals had I swallowed just to cling to a family that didn't want me? How many silent sacrifices had I made in the name of a love that never existed? The shame simmered beneath my skin, but it was quickly drowned by a surge of anger so potent it left a metallic taste in my mouth. I slammed the laptop shut and crossed the room, my heart hammering out a new rhythm. No more waiting, no more hoping. I needed a plan, a clean, sharp one. Sitting at the kitchen island, I drafted an internal memo. If the next payment was missed, barely 2 weeks away, I would move to enforce the mortgage terms, quietly, legally, ruthlessly. I scrolled to Caleb's number, my advisor, my fixer, and stared at it. He had always warned me, "Maura, you're sitting on a nuclear option. Just say the word." Tonight, the word was close to spilling from my lips. The past clung to me, whispering doubts. Was I really ready to burn every bridge? But then Darla's voice echoed again in my mind. A mistake. And the hesitation turned to ash. My fingers danced over the screen, composing a message. Short. Director. Professional. We need to initiate the contingency plan, confirm legal standing and readiness. I didn't send it yet. Instead, I moved to the window again, feeling the city's pulse match the adrenaline rushing through me. Rain slicked the glass, and beyond it, the world looked vast and unforgiving, just like them. "They've been living in my house all along," I whispered to my reflection, voice shaking with suppressed fury. "And now, it's time they pay." I hovered over the send button. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I was going to be their reckoning. The call from Caleb came just after sunrise, slicing through the thin veil of sleep I barely clung to. His voice was clipped, urgent. "Maura, we've got a problem. Someone's messing with the title to your parents' house." I shot up, heart slamming against my ribs. "What do you mean?" "There's a new filing. Someone tried to record a deed showing you transferred half ownership, voluntarily." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's a lie." "I know, but it's already in the system." The room tilted for a second before righting itself under the weight of my fury. Betrayal had a new face now. Paperwork. Cold, deliberate, inky betrayal. We spent the morning tearing into the records. Caleb's office hummed with tension as we scoured the digital footprint. IP addresses, file timestamps, notarizations that reeked of forgery. It didn't take long to find the names tucked neatly into the mess. Russell Reese, Darla Reese, and a bottom-feeding lawyer named Harold Sutton who had a reputation dirtier than a truck stop bathroom. My fingers trembled on the mouse. They hadn't just called me a mistake. They were actively trying to erase me from my own property. By noon, we had enough digital evidence to build a preliminary case, but it wasn't enough for me. I needed to see it, hold it. Using an alias, I slipped into the county registrar's office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the place smelling faintly of old paper and stale coffee. I handed over my request with a tight smile and waited, pulse roaring in my ears. When the clerk returned, she handed me a manila folder with an apologetic nod. I carried it to a corner and opened it slowly as if diffusing a bomb. There it was. The forged deed stared up at me, my signature at the bottom. Neat, careful, utterly fake. 16 years ago, Dad had forged my name on a permission slip, blaming me when the school called about unauthorized field trips. He laughed it off back then, said, "Sometimes you gotta bend the rules to get ahead, kid." This wasn't bending the rules. This was snapping them over his knee and tossing the pieces at my feet. I sat there for a long time, numb, the edges of the folder digging into my palms. Love didn't live here anymore. Maybe it never had. By evening, Caleb and I huddled in my apartment, papers spread across the island like battle plans. "We can sue," Caleb said, tapping a pen against the marble. "Publicly, loudly, embarrass the hell out of them." I shook my head. "Not yet. They think they're clever. Let them. The more rope, the better." He gave me a long look. "You're playing a dangerous game." I smiled thinly. "It's not a game. It's a reckoning." Later, alone, I stared at the copy of the forged deed under the harsh kitchen lights. Every line, every flourish of that fraudulent signature fueled the fire inside me. "You wanted a war, Dad?" I whispered, voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're about to find out what I've really learned." I closed my laptop with a sharp snap, a small, razor-sharp smile curling my lips. The invitation arrived wrapped in gold-trimmed paper, dropped at my door like a poisoned apple. Jason's engagement party, hastily arranged, all smiles and forced excitement. "Your family, Maura. We'd be honored to have you celebrate with us." It smelled like a setup. Still, I RSVP'd yes, curiosity laced with calculation. If they were baiting a trap, I intended to walk in with my eyes wide open. The country club's chandeliers spilled harsh light over the crowd as I entered, dressed in an icy blue satin dress that felt like armor. Whispers darted like invisible arrows around me. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years offered brittle hugs. Great-aunts flashed crocodile smiles. Jason grinned too wide when he spotted me, pulling his fiancée Chloe close like she was a trophy he couldn't wait to show off. I moved through the crowd, each step pressing against an invisible current of judgment. Conversations faltered when I approached. I caught fragments, poor Maura still alone, and she always was a little intense. Every word was a pinprick. I smiled through it, teeth sharp behind my lips. The real blow came later, mid-toast. Chloe, all fake modesty, announced, "Jason and I are just so lucky. And you know, if anyone else is still looking for love," her gaze landed squarely on me, "we've got a few eligible friends we'd love to introduce you to." The room tittered politely. A flush crept up my neck, but my smile stayed fixed, frozen in place like porcelain. Then Darla swept in, a glass of champagne sloshing in her hand, reeking of triumph. She leaned in, faux conspiratorial. "You know, sweetheart, it would mean the world if you considered donating the house as a wedding gift for Jason, a fresh start for the next generation." I stared at her, marveling at the gall. The house they'd plotted to steal. The house they thought they could guilt me into giving away, like some discarded hand-me-down. I blinked slowly, locking every shred of rage behind my lashes. "That's a generous thought, Darla," I said softly. "I'll certainly consider how best to support the family." She beamed, already assuming she had won. I spent the next hour planting tiny seeds of chaos with careful, sharpened words. Casual comments about the unstable real estate market, whispered warnings about sudden tax audits, musings on the difficulties young couples faced when hidden debts surfaced. Chloe's smile grew tighter. Jason's laughter thinned. Darla's eyes darted nervously across the room. When the first drops of rain spattered against the grand windows, I took it as my cue. I slipped away, letting the storm swallow me whole. The downpour soaked through my dress as I reached my car, the cold seeping into my bones. I didn't care. I tapped out a text to Caleb with trembling fingers. "It's time to move forward with Phase 2. Full exposure." A bolt of lightning cracked across the sky as I started the engine, the city shimmering through the rain-smeared windshield. I drove into the storm without looking back. The message came through at 6:12 a.m., short, clipped, unmistakable in its demand. "Family meeting. Today, noon." Be there. No signature necessary. Russell's tone burned through the screen, a voice that had once meant safety, now meaning summons. I stared at it over my coffee, steam curling into the cold morning air. Every instinct screamed to ignore it. But ignoring them hadn't worked. I needed to end this on my terms, not theirs. The old family house sat crouched behind brittle hedges and cracked walkways, a ghost of its former self. I parked at the curb, pulse steady but simmering. As I approached the door, the weight of years seemed to sag against the rotting wood. Inside, they waited. Russell, Darla, Jason, and two cousins I barely recognized, their faces tight with expectation. The living room smelled of dust and desperation. Russell didn't waste time. "We need to settle things, Maura. It's simple. You sign over half the house. Today. No arguments." My eyes narrowed. "And if I don't?" Jason leaned forward, predatory smile flashing. "Then we let everyone know what kind of daughter you really are, how you abandoned your family when they needed you most." The room seemed to tilt. I forced my breathing slow, even. Betrayal wrapped in cheap, sentimental paper. "You want to blackmail me?" I said calmly. "No, sweetheart," Darla crooned, voice trembling with practiced grief. "We just want what's fair. After all we've sacrificed for you." "Is it too much to ask?" Jason added, "You owe us, Maura. We made you who you are. It's time you paid that debt." The words clanged against my ribs. For a moment I couldn't speak. 16 years ago, I had stayed up night after night balancing the household bills when Russell drank through his paycheck. I had lied to teachers about bruises from falling down the stairs. I had built my life from scratch while they tore each other apart, and now they wanted payment for the scars they gifted me? I looked each of them in the eye, one by one, until they squirmed. Then I smiled, slow and razor-edged. "I'll consider my options." Russell slammed his hand on the coffee table. "You don't have options, Maura. Family's all you've got." I rose, smoothing my coat. Funny, it never felt like family when I needed it. Jason's voice sliced through the air as I walked toward the door. "You push us, Maura. You'll lose more than family. Count on it." I paused at the threshold, rain tapping a frantic rhythm against the sagging porch. My hand tightened around the doorframe. "If it's war you want," I said without turning back, "you just declared it on the wrong woman." I stepped into the storm, feeling the first true crackle of freedom under my skin. The cafe smelled of burnt coffee and wet coats, a perfect backdrop for what we were planning. Caleb sat across from me, his tablet open, face drawn tight with focus. Frances Ward, my attorney, adjusted her glasses, voice crisp as she laid out the last steps. "By tomorrow, they'll be legally frozen out of every corner of that house," Frances said. "Utilities, property access, all tied up." "And the eviction?" I asked, steady as a blade. "Filed simultaneously. Sheriff's office will serve notice within 72 hours. I nodded. The sadness that had once gnawed at me was quieter now, replaced by something colder, cleaner. No more waiting for apologies that would never come. Frances pushed the final papers across the table. I signed with a steady hand. The following morning, I stood at my apartment window and watched the courier van pull away, taking my retaliation straight to their doorstep. For a moment, I imagined Russell tearing open the envelope, Jason's cocky grin freezing, Darla's face collapsing into theatrics. I didn't smile. I simply closed the blinds. By late afternoon, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree from hell. First, Darla, voicemails dripping with venom, thinly veiled threats under the guise of family heartbreak. Then Jason, a slew of texts, each nastier than the last. "You'll regret this, Maura. You're no better than the trash you pretend to be above." Russell's letter arrived the next day, scrawled in that familiar, jagged handwriting. "Your mother cries herself to sleep. You're killing her, Maura. You've always been selfish." I crumpled the paper without reading further. 16 years ago, I had stood alone outside my high school auditorium, diploma clutched in my sweating hands, scanning a sea of faces for parents who never showed. No congratulations, no photos, just silence so loud it swallowed the whole night. Today was no different. Only now, I wasn't begging to be seen. The sheriff's office called 3 days later. Calm voice, official tone. The eviction notice is scheduled, Miss Reese. They have 30 days to comply. I closed my eyes, breathing through the static buzz of emotion. Thank you, I said. Please proceed. After the call ended, I leaned back, the city lights casting fractured shadows across the ceiling. One way or another, this ends with me. The first sign came from Caleb's voice, tight and clipped over the phone. You need to see this, he said. Now. It was a link. Anonymous reviews flooding my consulting firm's page. Lies sharpened to poison tips. Claims of fraud, theft, emotional abuse. Fake clients with fabricated sob stories. Each word a blade aimed at my reputation. I stared at the screen, the rage in my chest burning clean through the initial shock. They were trying to destroy me. Professionally, publicly, irreversibly. Caleb didn't need to spell it out. It's coordinated, he said grimly. The next morning, I sat in his office as he slid a tablet across the desk. Proof, he said. IP addresses, traced directly back to Jason's law firm and Darla's home Wi-Fi. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Betrayal wasn't new, but this was war by ambush, by cowardice. And they thought I wouldn't strike back? Not this time. Frances Ward met me for lunch that afternoon. Between bites of a dry sandwich, she outlined the lawsuit. Defamation, tortious interference, malicious intent. And we hit them professionally too? I asked. She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. They're both licensed. Let's see how the Bar Association feels about their little hobby. No hesitation, no second thoughts, only a cold, lethal focus tightening around my spine. The first shot was a letter of intent sent via her office. Jason's furious voicemail landed 2 hours later. You're out of your mind, he snarled. You're the one who's toxic. You made us do this. Right. Blame the target for the arrow. Then Darla, ever the chameleon, emailed me a masterpiece of gaslighting. We're so hurt by how you've twisted everything. We only wanted to push you toward family unity. Maybe if you hadn't isolated yourself. I closed the email without replying. 16 years ago, I had sat at a Thanksgiving table, silent and invisible, while Jason and Darla toasted each other for things I had secretly funded. Their smiles back then had felt like knives too. Tonight, those knives felt dull. Later, as the sun drowned behind the skyline, Frances called again. Her voice hummed with barely contained satisfaction. They just crossed a legal line they can't walk back from. I stepped onto my balcony, letting the cold air slap my cheeks. Good, I whispered into the night, watching the stars flicker behind the smog. Let them drown in it. It hit me like a blade through the ribs. Caleb's voice barely concealed the disgust as he forwarded the thread of emails. I opened them with trembling fingers. Lines and lines of quiet betrayal stared back at me. Messages from my mother to Jason and Darla, offering advice, plotting, cheering them on from the shadows. I blinked hard, but the words didn't change. We have to make her crack. Play the family card harder. She's vulnerable when she feels guilty. The person who once kissed my forehead goodnight had been pulling strings behind my back, crafting my downfall with the people who hated me most. The dam inside me broke. I collapsed onto the couch, the air thick and sour, my lungs unable to pull anything in. My mind hurled me back, 16 years ago, standing on the curb, dress shoes pinching, waiting for a ride after winning my scholarship. She never showed. Jason had needed a ride to a party. I had told myself for years that they loved me in their own broken way. No more. I sat there for hours, silent, motionless, letting the weight of it crush the last fragile hope I had clung to. When I finally moved, something inside me was gone. Forgiveness, maybe, or stupidity. 2 days before the hearing, I summoned them to Frances Ward's office. A sterile room, all steel and glass, humming with barely concealed animosity. Jason swaggered in first. Darla trailing, trying for a meek, wounded expression. Then my mother entered, her face composed, a mask I'd seen 1,000 times before. I didn't waste time. I slid copies of the emails across the table. "This ends one of two ways," I said, my voice as cold as the marble floor beneath us. "You confess, publicly, or I bury you all, professionally, financially, socially, irreversibly." The silence in the room stretched thin, buzzing like a live wire. Jason paled first. Darla's lip quivered. My mother, dropped her gaze, the first flicker of shame I'd seen from her in a lifetime. "Maura," she whispered, but the word died in her throat. "No," I said simply. "Save it." Jason's bravado crumbled. He reached for the papers, but his hands shook. Darla let out a broken sob, sinking into the leather chair like a punctured balloon. I stood slowly, the click of my heels sharp and deliberate. "You taught me everything about betrayal," I said, voice cutting clean through the air. "Now, watch me teach you about consequences." And without another word, I walked out, leaving them to drown in the ruin they had built with their own hands. The courtroom buzzed with a low hum of tension, thick as storm clouds. I sat rigidly, every nerve sharp and wired. Across the aisle, Jason and Darla huddled with their lawyers, throwing glances that couldn't quite mask the desperation leaking from their faces. My mother sat behind them, eyes downcast, betraying nothing. The bailiff called us to order. My attorney, Francis, gave a slight nod. Showtime. Jason was the first to take the stand. His voice dripped with practiced sorrow as he spun a web of half-truths. Darla followed, her voice trembling, thick with false tears. Then came the knife twist. She accused me, under oath, of emotional manipulation, of driving my own family to desperate actions. My breath caught. For a flicker, rage burned so white-hot I thought I might lose control. But I didn't. I let it settle into something far deadlier, absolute focus. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, the courtroom lights catching the cold gleam in my eyes. Francis laid it out methodically: emails, forged documents, financial records, and finally, the recording of Darla's drunken confession that had been slipped anonymously to Caleb days before. The courtroom shifted. Murmurs rose. Judges' brows furrowed. Darla turned pale, her hands trembling visibly. Jason's jaw worked furiously, searching for an escape that didn't exist. They were cornered, exactly where they had shoved me so many times before. The judge's ruling hit the room like a thunderclap. Restitution ordered. Full control of the property returned to me. Jason and Darla's attempts at defamation formally entered into the public record. Their licenses suspended pending further investigation. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. I simply gathered my things, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my jacket, and walked out into the blinding afternoon light. Outside, the city pulsed around me, oblivious to the battlefield left behind in that courtroom. I leaned against a stone pillar, letting the sun warm my skin. Victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted hollow, like winning a war you never wanted to fight. My family hadn't just lost the case. They had lost any sliver of humanity I had once fought to see in them. Later, as the sky melted into a bruised canvas of purples and golds, I drove to the coast. The ocean roared its ancient song, salt whipping the air, fierce and alive. I climbed to the overlook and stood there, the sea stretching endlessly before me. I thought of everything that had shattered, the childhood illusions, the longing for approval, the belief that love had to be earned through sacrifice. Maybe it had all needed to burn. Maybe this was how you forged yourself anew. I closed my eyes, breathing deep the brine and the wind. Tomorrow would come. So would the battles, the healing, the unknowns. I whispered to no one and everyone, "This isn't the end. It's just my beginning." Life rarely hands us victories tied with ribbons. Sometimes, the greatest triumphs are the ones we fight for alone, on the battlefields no one else sees. Through every betrayal, every broken promise, I learned this: Your worth isn't defined by the love you didn't receive or the validation others refuse to give. It's forged in the fire of what you survive and who you choose to become after the ashes settle. Standing here today, I can tell you, it's never too late to reclaim your voice, to draw your line in the sand and to say, no more. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from what once felt like family to save yourself? I'd love to hear your story. Let's connect in the comments. Tell me where you're from, or if this story touched your heart, simply comment 1. And if you believe in healing, strength, and new beginnings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story that just might speak straight to your soul.